What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to talk all about fertilizing misconceptions. These mistakes and misconceptions are very common. I see them happen all the time with not only beginning gardeners, but also more advanced gardeners, and I don't want you guys making these mistakes. Let's go. So the first common mistake I see a lot of gardeners making is assuming that you can fertilize anytime during the year and get similar results. Right? Fertilizer is fertilizer. Anytime you fertilize, the fertilizer is going to work. Wrong. During different times of the year, you're going to have different results when you fertilize. We just talked about this in our last episode. If you didn't see it, about how fast it takes fertilizer to give you the results you're looking for on plants that need it. We talked about how temperature makes a really big difference when it pertains to how fast a plant is going to react to that fertilizer. It's a huge misconception because I see people that will fertilize copious amounts of fertilizer in the spring when they don't actually really need the fertilizer because they've already re-amended, they've already fertilized, but their plants aren't growing that fast. And so they assume, well, maybe my plants need more fertilizer, when in reality, the plants are just taking longer to uptake that fertilizer to start working because it's colder in the spring. Same thing with the fall. You'll see plants that start to show signs of seasonal stress. They fertilize to say, well, I'm going to green up my plants. I'm going to get more growth out of my plants. And when they don't see the results they're looking for in a week or two, they refertilize, and then they end up over-fertilizing when in reality, had they just been patient, they would have eventually gotten the results they were looking for. And so I really want you guys to understand that fertilizer is the same, type of nutrient, but that same type of nutrient is going to be used much differently at different times during the season. The second most common misconception I see people making about fertilizer is that the larger the number, the better the fertilizer. This is probably the most common thing that I see floating around the internet and on forums when it pertains to fertilizer, and it's just not true. Not only is it not true, but it's also scientifically been proven to not be true, because the number on the bag just corresponds to a percentage by weight. So if you look at this bag of trifecta here, I'm fertilizing these peppers up. Trifecta has a 5-10-4. That means it's 5% by weight nitrogen, 10% by weight phosphorus, and 4% by weight potassium. That means if this bag weighed, let's just keep math simple and say 10 pounds, you're going to have about a half a pound of available nitrogen. You're going to have about 1 pound of available phosphorus, and you're going to have just a little bit less than half a pound of available potassium. So that really doesn't mean that's just what's in this bag. It has no relationship to the plants whatsoever. Plants will respond to any amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium that they're given. It wouldn't matter if this bag was a 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. It wouldn't matter if this bag was a 100. The plants would still take up that 1% of available nitrogen just as they would the 5% available nitrogen. What that really has more bearing on is how long that nitrogen will last in your soil. You see, these plants might have a need for a pound of nitrogen. Let's say this bed needs, right? Need versus want, right? I want a Ferrari. Do I need a Ferrari? No. I'm completely content with the car that I have. So these plants are completely content with a pound of nitrogen. Do they need it? No. They need 1 pound. Anything over that pound is a want, right? It'll stay in the soil. It's extra. The 5% nitrogen will simply be used until the plants have used as much as they need, and then it will stay in the soil until they need more. And that simply buys you time. So is it better? No, it's not. It's simply going to last in the soil longer. And some high count fertilizers are very plant available. They're very water soluble. And that doesn't mean they stay in the soil longer. Some are so potent that they're all water soluble. The plants take what they need, and then the next time it rains, it washes out into a creek or a river, into a lake, and then contaminates our waterways. So does it necessarily make it better? No, it doesn't. And so it is very, very important we distinguish the fact that you could fertilize with something like worm castings, which is the most gentle form of fertilizer that exists, and it can be just as effective as the most potent fertilizer possible that you can get on the market it has no bearing on how much the plant is going to grow or react. It just has to do with how much the plant can leave behind. So I want to make that distinction. The third most common misconception I see are people saying that you have to be careful when using something like compost because you can end up burning the plant by using too much. This is simply not true. Now, the reason why this is not true is because once something has been composted, it has been fully broken down. And when you fully break down something into plant available forms, it becomes a very natural form of nutrient that the plant will use gradually. It's not very concentrated. So if you were to take something like composted horse manure, if you were to take horse manure in a raw form, uncomposted, and throw it on your plants, that most certainly can burn the roots because it's very high in nitrogen. The nitrogen is so rich and it has not been yet broken down to a more gentle form of nitrogen that it can burn the plant. Chicken manure. Chicken manure, very natural, very normal to apply to plants. If you apply it uncomposted, it is very hot. It will end up burning, not hot as in temperature hot, but hot as in the amount, the concentration of nitrogen can actually burn the roots. And so that is something that a lot of gardeners, they have a trouble making the distinction of, is that if you don't fully compost something, yes, compost can be dangerous, but it's semi-finished compost, or it's in the process of being composted. If you take fully finished compost and apply it to your plants, there is no amount that you can add that's going to be dangerous. And I would die on that hill. Okay, I'll say it. I'll die on that hill. We grow in pure compost. We literally filled these beds up with 100% compost we got from our municipal compost facility. And these kale leaves are incredible. They're like one of the largest kale leaves I've ever grown in my entire life, grown in pure compost, and they're beautiful. There's no ill effects to growing in pure compost. I just want to remind you guys that when it comes to growing in composted manure, or any type of composted manure, whether it be chicken, sheep, goat, cow, horse, doesn't really matter. You really want to let those set and fully compost, fully break down. They should not be distinguishable. You should not be able to say, I can still see some remnants of manure. It should be completely broken down and completely composted before you use it, and then it's going to be safe. You're not ever going to have problems with over-fertilizing as it pertains to growing in compost. And the final misconception that I've got for you guys, and I think this is probably also, it's up there in probably top 2 or top 3 most common misconceptions, and that is the statement that all fertilizer is created equal because all nitrogen is the same, all phosphorus is the same, and all potassium is the same. And while that final statement is true, the rest of it is what is a misconception and what is false, because absolutely, a plant, when it looks at nitrogen, it could be synthetic, it could be water soluble, it could be worm castings, it could be the most organic nitrogen possible. It's going to understand that nitrogen equals new plant growth, and the plant's going to use the nitrogen all the same. But where things kind of diverge and they kind of separate is the source of those nutrients. I want to stress that when you go out to the store and you see a whole shelf full of nutrients, you want to make sure that you look at the ingredients, because there are so many different fertilizers that only focus on nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but they don't focus on things like trace minerals, or they don't focus on things like beneficial bacteria and fungi. They might also have stuff like filler, which is really tragic because when you're paying for a 3-pound bag, but you are paying for half of it to be something like sand, that's very tragic because you could be paying a whole lot less. And when it really comes down to fertilizer, what I would always recommend you do is to look at the ingredient labels, because it's so important that you, number one, get what you pay for, but also it's very important that you have a well-rounded fertilizer, because just like our diet, what goes into our soil goes into the plant. And what goes into the plant ultimately will go into our bodies. And when we only focus on things like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, it's the equivalent of you just eating just protein or just carbohydrates, right? You can't live on bread. You might be able to survive for a month or 2 on bread, but your body is eventually going to be starving for other nutrients, other minerals. And that is the same with your fertilizer. You cannot get hung up on these 3 numbers, because these 3 numbers They're going to be on every bag of fertilizer. It's really what's on the back and the ingredient label that makes the biggest difference. And the final thing I'll add to looking at the ingredients label is when you look at the ingredients label, it's going to tell you if you agree with what's in the bag or not. I can't tell you how many times people write on a forum and they say, hey, I bought this bag, but I just looked at the ingredients and like, I don't know what this ingredient is. Can you give me some information? You should always do your research and just see what the ingredients mean to see if you agree with them or not. Because if you don't agree with them, you're not gonna feel comfortable using them in your garden, and then you're just gonna have wasted money. And the other thing too is that we all vote with our dollars. And when we buy something that we don't agree with, we're really voting with our dollar that says this practice is totally fine. And that goes for anything. How your seeds are manufactured, where your seeds come from, where your fertilizer comes from, or even where your clothes come from. You're voting with your dollars, and it's so important that you vote with your dollar if you are someone that is passionate about that. And the ingredients label is by far the easiest way to do that. But for me, I think also the ingredients label just shows me how diverse a fertilizer is. And when it comes to something like Trifecta, the reason why I love using it so much is, and the reason why I made it, is because it's very diverse. It doesn't just focus on these three. It has over 70 different trace minerals, as well as bacteria and fungi, beneficial bacteria and fungi that you're never gonna find in those three numbers, because those three numbers are just the macronutrients. Those are the things that everybody focuses on, but that is no indicator as to the quality of the fertilizer that you're adding into the soil. And so that's what you're gonna get on the back of the bag. So please, please, please do your research. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And also, if you wanna get your hands on some Trifecta, that's what we use in all of our gardens. We've used it for years. We literally love it. It is amazing. And you can go check it out over at MIgardener.com. So as always, love you all so much, and grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care.